The last presentation will be presented by NPC. The presenter would be Kutso Selowa, the director of Valodagoma NPC. Valodagoma. You will correct me if I pronounce it correctly as well. This organization. It is over to you, Kutso, to take us through your presentation. Members, we do have this presentation as well. I think it will be flighted on the screen.
Chairperson, I think I don't see Kutso on the platform, but we do have.
I am here. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay.
I am. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to the sitting. My name is Kutso Selowa, as already said, the founding director of Valodagoma NPC, nonprofit company. I have with me my colleagues, Dr. George Mahashe, who is a senior lecturer based at the Michaelis School of Fine Art at the University of Cape Town. I also have with me Dr. Debo Rahoho, who is a lecturer and head of department in the Department of Applied Languages at the University of Tshwane University of Technology. And then I also have with me Mr. Kotazo Sishai. He's the co-creator of Khelovedu orthography. He is the compiler of the Khelovedu dictionary as well, and also the core translator of the Khelovedu Bible with the Bible Society of South Africa. I don't know if I have sharing rights. There's a slide presentation that we put together, particularly for this sitting.
Yes.
Chairperson, let me find out who is going to flight it. I did not receive the PowerPoint, so perhaps they can assist so that I can give the presenter the co-hosting rights for them to flight it for us.
Okay. Kutso, are you there?
Yes, I am still here. I am unable to share. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, try again, Mr. Slow.
Okay. Oh yeah, I think we should be good to go now. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, I do see something now.
Okay. Yes. So we made a submission in 2020, I believe it was April, and it was called to have Khelovedu recognized as an official language and included in the mandate to develop the Khoi and the San languages and sign language that have been mandated in Act 10 of 1999 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. This presentation is made by Valodagoma NPC. As I said, my colleagues will be jumping in every now and then and will be covering certain slides in this presentation. There will be quite some fluidity as well, where they can add points and also try to give a bit more understanding. Now, the first slide being the historical background and context, maybe just to confirm, can you guys see the writing on the screen? Is it big enough?
But it's very faint.
Okay, let's see if I can't
size 8.
bring it forward a bit.
At least 10.
Is it better?
Try 10. Let's see 10.
I'll also make sure to read it out and make sure everybody can hear what was there. But just to start, so Balobedu, with the brief history, at some point in their history, they did have contact with people presently known as Bavenda and also Northeastern Sotho people. And although Khelovedu as a language, or rather, Khelovedu as a language still has distinct grammatical features, which suggest that Khelovedu is an independent language. So up until when the apartheid government took power in the 1940s, the indigenous languages were being developed by missionaries. The apartheid government demoted Mujaji, that is the queen of Balobedu, from being a queen to being a chief, along with their language and subsequently culture being demoted as well. Although the government has since restored Mujaji's title of queenship, the language is still subjected to dialect status. So despite Khelovedu being an independent language, Lobedu learners still have to do Sepedi as a mother tongue language at school. The word mother tongue in this context is a misnomer to Balobedu because the language they speak at home is not the same as the language they are required to do as a home language at school. Instead of solving the problem by letting Lobedu learners and teachers work with Khelovedu as their home language, programs are being developed that force teachers to help their learners first comprehend Sepedi before teaching them in that language. Instead of developing the Khelovedu language and allowing both teachers who are also Lobedu and learners to continue interacting in their mother tongue, which is Khelovedu. So in this context, Valodagoma have not been able to get a useful oral tradition because they do not have access to the language in its entirety due to their language being Sothoized. And for this context as well, I will open up to my colleagues so that if they do want to add some points here, they can very much do so.
Yes.
If no comments, then I'll go to the next slide. And then, is it not scrolling? Okay, scroll here. And then hand over to Kotadzu.
Morning, Chair, colleagues, and the rest of the committee. I'll be going through the development and testing of the Lobedu orthography. One of the challenges in the past was that Khelovedu did not have an orthography, as well as literature and educational material that can be used to develop the language in a written form. So to address this hurdle, the Valodagoma took it upon themselves to start with the development of the orthography and also produce other material that can be used to standardize the language and reduce it to a written form. Due to the similarities between Lobedu language and Venda, an orthography akin to Venda was developed because even on listening, one can hear that Khelovedu in itself, it's an amalgamation of Karanga, Ngona, and Sotho. And to this day, the statement made by the Kriches in 1943 stating that it approximates to Venda in much of its vocabulary, falls midway between Sotho and Venda in grammatical structure, but Sothoized in phonology, but many of its sounds are unknown in Sotho. And it is for this reason that an orthography akin to Venda was adopted. Also, a developmental dictionary was made available to the public for review, as well as to initiate the process of a possible standardization of the orthography. And this gained the attention of the Bible Society of South Africa, seeing the willingness of Balobedu, as well as the feasibility of the translation process for a Khelovedu Bible. And they greenlit the project and made a committee consisting of about 15 individuals speaking for different varieties of Khelovedu, that is Khekwebo, spoken by the Royal Compound and surrounding areas, and Kitswabo, Keroga, and the Mamaila variety. The inclusion of these different varieties ensures that not only one variety is used in the written language, which will result in formation of a superiority complex, as well as marginalization and stigmatization of the varieties which would not be included in the written form. It also benefits the language as it expands and enriches the written form with a vast number of vocabulary as utilized by the different groups. The inclusion of the young and the elderly people also is beneficial, especially when elderlies are included in the group. They still retain some memory of the proper usage of words as well as proper pronunciation that is becoming more and more faint to the younger generation. And there is emergence of vocabulary that has since been displaced by the Northern Sotho vocabulary that we use at school. For example, words like madrenko for evening is displaced by manjivoya, which is derived from manjivoya of Bidi at school. And words like makai for lice is now displaced by maga that we use at school. And words like le fomi for 10 is replaced by the Northern Sotho lesumi. So in all this process, it becomes more apparent that Khelovedu as a language, though it might have roots in both Sotho and Venda, it still has some autonomy. And when pushed as a dialect of either of the two, it is compromised and it puts Valodagoma at a disadvantage. And it is because of this reason we believe as Valodagoma that it should be accorded the status of a stand-alone language, because if as a dialect of Northern Sotho, some features of Khelovedu cannot be utilized for educational purposes, and if regarded as a dialect of Venda, more features which Valodagoma do not recognize and are foreign to them will be introduced to the language, thus not solving the problem at all. Thank you. I'll hand over to my colleagues if they have something else to add.
Yes.
I think it's well put.
Okay, thank you.
Kothatso, you can just finish up on the second slide here.
Okay.
Chairperson, through you, Dr. Motsefa is on the platform, maybe just to recognize him.
So the extensive and rigorous process used in the translation process not only challenges the vocabulary, it also challenges the grammatical features that will be used to standardize the language. And it's very beneficial because in doing so, even the orthography itself begins to evolve into a more practical and readable vocabulary, but also not compromising the linguistic and phonetical structure of the language. And with regard to Northern Sotho, Khelovedu grammar leans more towards it than Venda, but much of its vocabulary still is similar to Chivenda, thus creating a dilemma that needs a resolution that will not put Khelovedu at a disadvantage and not sacrifice the integrity of the language. And as I've mentioned before, that is the main point that we're driving home, that not only to restore the integrity of Valodagoma, but to resolve this dilemma that Khelovedu has, it should be accorded its status of a standalone language. I think that is the end of my slide.
Yes, I'll now hand over to Dr. Mahashi. Or rather, sorry, I'll go through this one myself, and then the next one will be Dr. Mahashi. So in preparing this, we also did look through a few articles, published articles in journals about the struggles that Khelovedu learners have when they're doing Sepedi. And one article was picked out in particular, which is a study titled Exploring Grade 8 Khelovedu speaking learners writing challenges in Sepedi home language in Mopani district, South Africa, which is where majority of Valodagoma are. So according to CAPS, which guides the teaching and learning in South African public schools, the home languages offered at schools in Mopani district are Sepedi and Xitsonga, according to the Department of Education. Therefore, learners who are raised in Khelovedu communities who speak Khelovedu at home and socially are compelled to learn Sepedi as their home language in schools. Despite Khelovedu being an independent language, Khelovedu learners still have to do Sepedi as a mother tongue language. This is where that whole misnomer comes in, because that is not their mother tongue. And then in 2015, the learner performances in Sepedi was reported at 53.71% pass rate in the Greater Tzaneen municipality, where Maputa circuit is located. The learners' performances are recorded as being 14.4% 0.59% less than the national average, posing a serious concern in the district. According to basic education requirements, for one to proceed to the next grade, they need to have passed their home language. And Balobedu are already put in a disadvantage in that regard because it is not their home language. And when they do struggle, they are then not permitted to go to the next class. And then the study goes on to say that it is evident from the data presented in the study that the grade 8 learners who were chosen as a sample for the study were struggling to write in Sepedi because it is not their L1 or home language. Learners spell as they speak. They have limited vocabulary in Sepedi and consequently end up using Khelovedu words in Sepedi writing. As a result, their spoken language appears to interfere with their writing instead of being additive. This supports Crow, Berry, and Van's 1981 conclusion that the writing of all learners closely resembles talk written down, which is likely to incorporate many features of speech, including speech sounds of their language. All these experiences are contrary to the behavior theory, where learning will occur more frequently when followed by reinforcement, imitation, and association under controlled conditions, as pointed out by Skinner. Also, I will open it to my colleagues if they have anything to add on the slide.
No,
If not, we can go to the next slide and I will hand over to Dr. Mahashi.
Thobela. For my presentation section, I think I want to pick up on an issue raised as point 17 of the legal judgment that was sought after our submission. For me, the issue of Khelovedu as a marginalized language, whether as a marginal subsection of Sepedi or just as an indigenous knowledge in the South African language family, is more than anything a result of a punitive act by the apartheid government, because Queen Mujaji was quite active in bringing coherence to the northeastern Transvaal at that point as resistance against apartheid. So when they demoted her to a chief, that had more to do with trying to break Balobedu's coherence. And as a result, the language followed. As a result, they blocked the development of the language by missionaries and promoted Sepedi much more aggressively in the region. So Khelovedu's position and its current Sothoization is the result of that moment. For me, Kuthatso has given a context of how Sepedi becomes, how Khelovedu becomes what it is in relation to Sepedi. A point that I would like to also add is that prior to the 1930s, when anthropologists decided that Balobedu would be absorbed by Bapedi, Khelovedu had its own diction that has subsequently, over the last 90 years, been completely pushed down into the underground. So for me, I think that's the most important context to put. With the recognition and the restoration of the Balobedu Royal House, there was an expectation, or rather, there was a moment of unity that Balobedu have now received, because all of a sudden we are visible. An important thing to note in relation to what Pujo has just put down about the learners. Khelovedu is a matter of pride. Up until maybe 2017, when I was at Wits, Balobedu hide. They do not speak their language in public. They pretend to be Bapedi, and this is very common. So there is an issue of shame around being Balobedu. We are constantly told that we are not South African. So there is an issue there of woundedness that is associated with the Khelovedu language as something that does not exist. So there is an issue of Balobedu not being seen as part of the South African franchise. There is a perception by other groups that see us not as South African, and that's a serious problem. So even if one could address the issues the learners are facing through technical means of providing more material, the issue is not whether the students will pass, is whether the students will be confident enough to use their knowledge and background to contribute to South Africa. An important aspect of Khelovedu is that we come with the history of many, many years of observing South Africa's ecology. And we have a lot to offer in terms of our knowledge of the ecology, our knowledge of drought, our knowledge of ways of managing water resources, and all of that knowledge is locked in our language. If we do not give dignity and pride to Valodagoma, that knowledge will remain hidden because we will never bring it onto the table. So for me, it's an important point to raise that making Khelovedu official is about restoring our sense of being part of the nation, even though it is not necessarily even though it's discretionary. The important part is that the act of making it official is a way of undoing more than 80 years of apartheid era punishment to Valodagoma. So that for me, I think is a very important part, the aspect of reassuring Valodagoma that we matter, that we are part of the country. Like the Khoisan, we are a group that has been systematically, structurally excluded from the franchise of South Africa. It is important to address that issue by the gesture of making Khelovedu official. So I think for me, that's the most important point to raise about why Khelovedu should become official. And also it's important to note that even if you put money through institutions like PenSouth to develop the language cannot develop until Valodagoma buy into it. Valodagoma will buy into it when there is a sense of national pride. In order for PenSouth to do its job, Valodagoma have to write, have to publish, have to create the material that allows development. As long as our students value Sepedi, they will always produce material in Sepedi. So I think for me, that's important. So any of the developmental mandates are not feasible unless the pride of Valodagoma is restored. And then one point, the other point to add, we are in the process of finalizing the rights to publish the completed books of the Bible, which test out the orthography that's being developed. And with that, there is a potential for us to at least put out more Khelovedu material out there. And I think Kujo can just share an image of what one of these chapters look like. At the same time, as a researcher during the year of meeting 4 times a year for 5 days straight, I have been recording the discussions, the debates, the processes of coming up with languages where one can see that a lot of the Valodagoma vocabulary does not exist in Kisotho. And there is an opportunity for us to use the artificial intelligence to be able to take that type of material and assist our generation in making Khelovedu more accessible on the internet. To say that the 4 IRs, I am referring to a program at UP where they are teaching computers how to translate English text, any other text into Southern African languages. And there is a moment and an interest in languages that have low resources. And to say a language has low resources, it means there is not enough that has been written about the language. So we also sit at a moment where technology can assist in bridging the gap that is created by 8 years of not developing, of not producing sufficient quantities of Khelovedu material. And maybe let me stop there, Khelovedu.
Thank you very much. And then for the next slide, I will then go to Dr. Rakhoho to take us through it.
Can you share with us that material first, Kuzo, before we go to him?
Oh, the Bible chapters.
Yeah, that he said you can share with us here so that we.
I'd have to
Okay,
open up
okay,
the program.
Let me not disturb. Go your own way. Kuzo is fine. I thought it's something very close so that we link with this presentation easily. Okay.
Yeah, we will share it along with the resources. We're going to share more resources because it's a development process. We just received those rights to go ahead and share it with the public. So it's some of the resources we will be sending to you guys.
Thanks, Kuzo. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Yeah, my name is Teboko. Maybe before I can talk to the constitutional imperatives, I think in the historical background, Kuzo, especially on second bullet point, touched on the issue of missionaries. I think for the purpose of this presentation, it may be important for the committee to understand the partnership between the missionaries and the colonial government. So if we were to look into the historiographic analysis of the partnership between the missionaries and the colonial government, critics may support that this is considered, or this should be considered, as one of the contributing factors or the qualitative variables that gave birth to the stigmatization of Khelovedu as a South African indigenous language. And it is also important to mention that in the 19th century, the standardization of the so-called Bantu languages, especially in a South African context, was handled by missionaries. So in the case of the language under attention, which is Khelovedu, so the history articulates that in 1860, Alexander Merinsky from the German missionaries was responsible for the standardization of the Sepedi language. So through the partnership between the missionaries and the colonial government, the decision was taken that Sepedi as a dialect should be elevated to the status of an official language, and the rest of the languages like Khelovedu were classified as a dialect of the Sepedi language. And you may realize that should be considered a colonial casualty, because that decision lacked a linguistic justification. People were not consulted. There was not even the process was not even transparent. So the decision to classify Khelovedu as a dialect, that decision, Chair, only accommodated the administrative system of the previous regime. So let me go straight to the constitutional imperatives. There's a link or connection between section 6.1 of the Constitution and also section 7.18 of the Constitution. Obviously, section 6.1 talks about the status of official languages in the country. But when you go to section 17.18 of the Constitution, it talks about the freedom of association. So in terms of this presentation, this particular section takes us to the issue of the relationship between language, culture, and identity, which cannot be separated, meaning that we as Valodagoma cannot be Valodagoma and Bapedi at the same time. And then when you go to section 6.5 of the Constitution, it talks about the role and the responsibility of the Pan-South African Language Board established by national legislation that PENSELP should promote and ensure respect for all languages commonly used by communities in the country. So from a constitutional implementation point of view, Chair, you may realize that, I mean, the Constitution went further to list some of the European languages that we don't even know in the country. But languages such as Khelovedu were not even listed. And if you can go and check the statistics, you may find out that the numbers of the Khelovedu speakers in the country are even more than the number of some of the languages that were accorded the official status in terms of the section 6.1 of the Constitution. And we have already indicated that the decision to classify Khelovedu as a dialect lacked transparency, consultation, and a linguistic justification. And from that view, Chair, you will realize that this becomes a social justice issue, not only a social justice issue, it also becomes a linguistic human rights issue, because our linguistic rights as Valodagoma were undermined because we were simply categorized and classified as a group of Bapedi without taking into consideration the linguistic justifications. You go and check Section 2 of the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act 41 of 2003, Chair. It talks about the official kinships and queenships in South Africa. And from that table, you realize the Valovedu is the only official queenship in the country. We have Amakhosa kinship, and they do have the language that is attached to their kinship. Amazulu kinship, there's a language that is attached to their kinship. There's Vavenda kinship, there's a language that is attached to their kinship. Amandebele kinship, there's a language that is attached to their kinship. The Bapedi kinship, they also have their language, which is Sepedi, that is attached to their kinship. But in the context of Valovedu, we have got a queenship, but there is no language, there's no official language that is attached to the queenship. And to recognize the queenship in terms of this piece of legislation is to recognize that these people have got their own identity, they've got their own culture, they also have their own language. So in conclusion, I think it is safe to indicate that, especially in terms of this presentation, Chair, in a South African context, decisions about whether speech forms constitute an independent language or a dialect are in most cases based on language ideology, not necessarily on linguistic criteria. And this is particularly because language planning in South Africa is actually a political exercise. And this is the reason, this is one of the contributing factors why Khelovedu as a language was sacrificed. And it is also important to mention that it was wrong to classify Khelovedu as a dialect of Sepedi. Khelovedu is not a dialect of Sepedi. And those who are advocating that Khelovedu should be treated as a dialect do not want to take into consideration the historical reasons and how languages were standardized and how languages were accorded the official status internationally. So I think the struggle of revitalizing and recognizing Khelovedu as a South African indigenous language in terms of this presentation is a postulation for epistemic justice as a core imperative of decoloniality. I've already indicated that the decision to classify Khelovedu as a dialect, it undermines our linguistic rights as Valodagoma. So it is a linguistic human right. It is also a social justice matter. So in conclusion, Chair, Khelovedu as a language has got its own linguistic repertoires to serve as a fully fledged language. And from this presentation, I mean, the good stories about the translation of the Bible, the dictionary that has been prepared, is a clear indication that this language has got its own linguistic repertoires to serve as a fully fleshed language, not to be treated as a dialect of another language. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. The resource that Dr. Mahashe was alluding to, being Genesis chapter, is here on the screen, and I will allow Kotazo to just read a few chapters just so we can see how Khelovedu is and how it actually sounds. Kotazo, you can go ahead.
Please.
Okay. Genesi ya pele o tholwa ha lefase. Mathomo ni modimo thode mathado le lefase. Lefase le be le khena ke bobeo le ona le khena khelo. Bodiba ba o thiba zothe bo be bo aparetseke letshwifi. Moya wa modimo o alamete mazi. Modimo a re a o be le khiedi, khiedi ka ba ona. Modimo a bona khiedi khena khile, a khobantšha khiedi le letshwifi. Ke mo ka modimo a re khiedi ke matsheare, letshwifi a re ke bosiu. Wa fera madrenkgo wa da mutsho, leo e be e letšatši la mathomo. Modimo a re a o be le lefaufau la o khobantšha mazi a be mafilong a mabedi, zwa diea. Ke yona modimo a khidia lefaufau, a khobantšha mazi a ka fase ya lona le a ka dedolo wa lona. A re lefaufau ke leratadima, wa fera madrenkgo wa da mutsho, leo e be e letšatši la bobedi. Modimo a re nke mazi a ka fase ya leratadima a khobakane felo ka o thii gore fase mo o omilego o bonale, zwa diea. A re mo o omilego ke lešako, mazi a khobakane felo ka o thii a re ke lewate, modimo a bona zwe nakhile. Ke moka a laela a re nke lešako le kweleje semela o ya ka mefuta ya zona, zwa o fara dithoro le mere ya wanwa metšhelo, zwa diea. Lešako la kweleja semela o ya ka mefuta ya zona, modimo a bona zwe nakhile. Wa fera madrenkgo wa da mutsho, leo e be e letšatši la boraro. Modimo a re nke o be le ziedi ratadimeni o khobantšha matsheare le bosiu, zwe be zwe ka za o supeja o thoma majaji le menyaa le khathizo zwe beilego. Zwe phadime le ratadimeni o bonekela lefase, zwa diea. Ke wona modimo a khidia ziedi zwe zebedi zwe zolo, letšatši la o busa matsheare le meedi wa o busa bosiu le lenanedi.
Thank you very much, Kotazo. Chair, that was just to give you a bit of a hint of the work that as Valodagoma we are doing with the Bible Society of South Africa and along with the royal houses of Khelovedu and the elders, as mentioned before, and how much work is actually being put out for Khelovedu. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. We thank you very much again for giving us this opportunity, and we hope that our call and our cry will be heard by this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Modimo Akada Zwera Zwi, Zwavadi Zwe, Zuhari, Lejaji Huvusa, Macheha. You see, we need to learn this African language. Thank you very much for the reading. It was quite interesting. Members, here is the presentation presented to us. Let's engage with it. Thank you very much once more for the material. You know, if you will ask me to read it, I will read it in Zulu. And it's true that some of the words, you know, they're very similar, even though they are written in different languages. I now know why you want Khelovedu to have its own standing. Members, there's the presentation in front of us. Can we start to engage with? Let me also recognize the doctor, my co-chair in the platform. I'm told he is already logged in. He was also engaged in another executive meeting earlier on this morning. Thanks, Doc, for joining us. Are you there, Doc?
Thank you, Co-Chair, for steering the ship so well, and thank you for allowing me to attend the other meeting.
Yes, let me start with you, Doc. If you have a seeking clarity question on this presentation, because this one you had it, I know you were here.
No, Co-Chair, the clarity is just from the submitters, whether they believe that the question of orthography is finally settled, and all that is required is really to proceed with question of literature, so that, at the moment we have early childhood development centers that are being mainstreamed, whether they think they can be ready even to produce literature for use in the ECDs. That's all.
Any other question, members? Otherwise, Kuto, you may respond with your team.
Yes, thank you for that. We believe, because of the work we've been doing, and not only because of that, but also of the archived work we've been able to get about the orthography of Khelovedu, we believe the orthography question has been answered. And we believe that especially the work we are doing with the Bible Society, that can give solid ground for more literature to come out, especially if that is the most tested orthography in Balobedu, the most agreed upon, and we can continue forward with that. And the rest of the questions I can also open up to my colleagues to have a go at it.
If I can come in, I think indeed the orthography question is settled, and it's just a matter of time for things to be streamlined to a point that everybody can easily buy into it. The point that remains to be hammered down is that in order for more literature to be produced, sense of pride about Khelovedu needs to be heightened. So it is really that the two go hand in hand. We can have the orthography, but without that sense of pride, not enough material will be produced. But for the purposes that Prof. Motseka has stated, we are ready to meet those demands.
Okay. Also, my question is that if you may assist me, in the Nguni language like Swazi, Xhosa, Zulu, they quite close to each other. Even some of the spellings are the same. How different it is, Pedi and Khelovedu? Is in the pronunciation of the words, or it's totally when... I'm trying to think here. I knew the political issues, how the Khelovedu was undermined, but I just want the language, how closer it is to each other.
Thank you, Chair. And Kutazo being more technical in this regard than I am, I will give it to him to have a go.
Okay, thank you. To answer that in a simple answer, so Khelovedu not only possesses a higher degree of vocabulary that is similar to that of Venda because of the interaction of the early Balobedu with the Ngona. Also, it carried over some of the grammar that is akin to that of Venda. So when it comes to Khelovedu and Pedi, so the main people that, or the main Sotho people that Balobedu interacted with, they were speaking Northeastern Sotho, which possessed much more primitive sounds or much more primitive features as stated by the missionaries. So that is how it will be different. While Pedi is much more advanced in its phonetic structure and also possesses a higher degree of the mainstream Sotho vocabulary. Khelovedu, on the other hand, it has primitive structure of Sotho as an umbrella of languages, and also it has a high degree of vocabulary that it carried over from the Ngona language of Bavenda, and also some vocabulary that is actually from Karanga, so it will make it more similar to Shona languages, especially your Eastern Shona languages. That is how it differs. So it will have grammatical features which are similar to Sotho because of the interaction between Khelovedu and Northeastern Sotho. But even in that regard, for instance, so though the baseline phonological process might be the same, you end up with, for instance, a word for child in Sepedi is ngwana, and then in Lobedu is miana. These two words are cognates, but because of the different phonological process which are applied in these two languages, you end up having two words which are similar but still different. For if I said Nyana to a Pedi person, somebody who has not done linguistics will not understand what I'm referring to, but only a person who has a linguistic background will then be able to determine that Nyana is actually Mwana in Pedi. And that applies to several other words.
Chairperson.
Yes,
Chairperson.
Yes.
Can I just do a follow-up? I want to know if the submitters have investigated into the fact that Khelovedu is actually Khilozi, which was an official language of the Empire of Vulozi, which covered a great Zimbabwe, southern Mozambique, eastern Botswana, and northern province. In other words, I'm trying to say that talking about linkages with Venda, Pedi, and so on. I want to know if they have looked into the independent history of Khelovedu out of the empire of Karanga or Vulozi. Thank you.
Kuso?
Thank you very much. With the last submission we did, there was a resource that actually does touch on the history of Balobedu as they come down, and I think that was prepared by Kotazo. Maybe Kotazo, just a few pointers from that that resource, particularly to try and address the question that's being put forward by the chair.
I think that research was mainly tracing down the history as well as changes to the language itself. So oral history as well as other historical paper trace the origin of Balobedu to the Vurozi kingdom in Bukaranga, which would be somewhere in present-day Zimbabwe. So these people, Balobedzi or Barozi, they spoke a Karanga dialect, and then in their migration down south, they interacted with Bangona, and that is how they acquired Bakwebo and Nengwekuru, and then they formed a language that was akin to an early form of Venda. But when the Masingo came and conquered the Bavenda, so the two languages separated and became autonomous. They could no longer be regarded as variants of the same language because the Masingo then came with a different, or rather additional features into the Venda language, while Khelovedu did not have those features at all, as I've said earlier on. And then later on, this Kwebo dialect, which was spoken by the group that the Balobedu kingdom, and then was influenced by the surrounding northeastern Sotos to take the final form of the language that we know as Khelovedu today. So the historical interaction between Bapedi and Balobedu comes later on. So to regard Khelovedu as a dialect of Pedi would be erroneous because it was not even a direct influence. It was an indirect influence via Setokwa and your languages of Balaudi like Setswapo into Khelovedu, because at that point, like kingdoms such as Bakhaga were modeling their kingdoms based on the kingdom of Mojaji, and that's how influence of Kipedi ended up penetrating into the Khelovedu language. I don't know if that answers the question completely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof, are you assisted?
No, I'm assisted co-chair. Thank you.
Let me give it back to you, Kutso. Any other thing that you think members might have not grabbed on it in your conclusion remark?
Thank you, Chair. From my side, I think we've tried to put the case forward. If members still have questions, we are more than willing through email to still engage to provide a bit more clarity. But also, I'm not quite sure if some of my colleagues wanted to add something else in closing.
I know, Level. I think you've covered everything.
Nothing from my side, Chair. We just want to thank the opportunity.
Okay. Boku?
Nothing also from my side. Thank you for the opportunity. If anything else is needed, please do contact us. We'll be more than willing to assist. Thank you.
Okay. Through you, Kutso, thank you very much for this detailed presentation. You have also educated us in terms of this language. And actually, you said one thing to us: we must go back and study our roots. We really appreciate it. We will definitely look into this matter, and the committee, when it meets, we might be engaging with you now and then until we come to finality of this issue, either by email or sometimes, if need be, we can still invite you to such platform and come and clarify to the committee whatever members might need at that time. Thanks for the presentation, the material, and everything else that we have compiled for the committee. I know it's quite a detailed material. We will definitely take it into account, whatever that has been said. The committee is in a mission of trying to finalize 1 or 2 or 4 of these all long outstanding matters before the end of this term. So thank you very much once more. I will ask the members that are in the platform to remain behind while Kutso and his team are leaving the platform. Thank you once more again.